Hey guys, so in this video we're going to go ahead and discuss auto lockouts in YaV1. In short, what they are, if you're not familiar with them, if you guys have ever used a radar detector before, you've probably noticed that there are a ton of sources of false alerts. Some really common ones are things like those radar speed signs that say what your speed is, as well as maybe even more commonly, those automatic door openers. You'll see them in gas stations and grocery stores, and every time you pass them, your radar detector will start to go nuts. Well, a good way of actually filtering those out is using GPS. If those signals are going to be in the same location every time you pass by, and their frequencies are going to be very similar every time you pass by, you can say, well, I've seen this frequency signal at this location. Let me actually mute this signal because it looks like this is not an actual threat. This is just a false alert. So this is basically what your phone, if your detector doesn't have a GPS chip built in, some detectors are like that, including the V1, you can add this functionality with a phone. With the Escort Redline, for example, you can do it by adding Escort Live. The 9500iX or the Passport Max actually have a GPS chip built in. With the V1, you can now do it with YaV1. YaV1 is a third-party free app available in the Google Play Store, Android only, and YaV1 2.0 is now available. And one of the main features that has been released for YaV1 2.0 is the ability to now do auto lockouts. Now, the way that auto lockouts are handled with YaV1 is a little bit different than is done with Escort. If you've ever used an Escort product, one of the complaints that people may have is well, on one hand, it's really good at locking out falses. The way that it does it is pretty aggressive. It does a good job of making sure that once a signal is locked out, it stays locked out. The compromise in the way that it's implemented there is it's actually kind of likely that it will lock out a legitimate threat. And the way this can happen is, let's say I've got a pocket radar here, and I'm just going to transmit. And the pocket radar is transmitting at 24.133 gigahertz. So basically what would happen is every time, let's say I'm driving in a car, if I pass a signal that's within a certain frequency range near that exact frequency, it's going to say, this looks like the same signal. In Escort land, it would basically mute any and all signals that are near that frequency range, meaning if you pass by a false alert a bunch of times and there's only one signal there, if you pass by it later on and now there's two signals in the same location at the similar frequency, it will actually ignore all of the false alerts. Well, the alerts, even if they're true alerts. So if you've locked out one signal and now suddenly there's 1,000 signals that are all around the same frequency, it'll actually mute all of them. So you can see why that would be a risk. One of the things that has been done with YaV1 is it's a little bit smarter. It will say, okay, well, I only actually have one lockout in this area. If I see a second signal, even if that one is muted, I want you to go ahead and alert anyways. So for this reason, it's actually a lot safer than some of the other implementations. So this is one of the ways that the lockouts here have been made a lot safer than you'll see elsewhere. Now I'm going to go ahead and shoot this a second time. And you'll see right now it's that same signal now has this light blue background. It's still 24.133 gigahertz. So that is there because it's saying, okay, well, I've seen this signal before. It's now in learning mode. I have it configured, and I'll show you this in just a minute. When I've seen this signal before, I want it to actually tell me that it's now in learning mode. It has not been seen enough times to actually be fully locked out yet, but it's not the first time it's seen the signal either. So what we can do is, as long as we wait more than 10 seconds, it's going to treat it as a new alert. So if I go ahead and transmit this again, you're going to see now it's actually dark blue. And it's dark blue there saying, okay, 24.135. You'll notice if I transmit, it's actually silent on the V1. Oh, I think it was silent before as well because I do have Yavi emulation turned on, which basically says if I'm traveling below a certain speed, hold on, where is it? General settings, GPS. If I'm traveling below 35 miles an hour, it's going to mute this signal anyways. So if I was driving faster, this signal would actually go full alert. So what I could do is if I turn this off, let's go back in, I can actually go in and unlock this signal. So probably have some other muting settings in there because I do have some aggressive muting settings, but if I was driving, this would be real. So awesome, I'm demonstrating it and it's muted anyways. Anyways, so this should alert normally if you're driving, but some of my other settings are muting it anyways. Anyways, what we've got going on here is let's take a look at some of the lockout settings and how this works. So we're going to go into, oh, whoops, not that one. That'll allow us back up all of our lockouts, which is kind of nice. So we're going to go into the settings, and then we're going to go into lockouts. So let's go ahead and go through the lockout options here in the app, and I'm going to explain what everything means, and as we go over the settings here, you're going to get a feel for how the lockouts really work. So you can turn lockouts on and off altogether. Pretty simple to do. Lockouts by default only lock out K-band and X-band, because those are the signals where you're typically going to be seeing your false alerts from automatic door openers and all. You do have the option of locking out Ka-band alerts. This is much riskier because typically Ka-band is where only police are. There's much fewer Ka falses. If you have a Ka-band speed sign, you do have the option of enabling Ka-band lockouts and locking them out. But the default is to have it turned off, and I would highly recommend you leave that off unless you know exactly what you're doing and you know for a fact that there's Ka-band speed signs and you want to lock them out. But if you're not sure, leave it off. So the background color here, you can actually go in and adjust when a signal is fully locked out, as you saw. It will be dark blue with the background. I've actually got it set for a different color background if I've manually locked it out. So to show you that, what we're going to do is go ahead and trigger this alert, and I'm going to tap on it, and I'm going to lock it out manually. So now you can see it's now got this purple background, and it's there because that's what I've got set up here in my options. So for lockouts, if I've manually locked it out, it's going to be a purple background. And then there's now also an option for a whitelisted signal. A whitelisted signal is basically saying, this signal that we're seeing, I don't want you to ever lock it out. I want it to always alert. So what we can do is if we go in there, I'm going to first unlock this, and then the options go away. Let the alert go away. Click on it again. Oh, I'll wait a little longer. I have to wait 10 seconds or so. So actually, while we're waiting, I'll show you that in a bit. But basically, let's go back into here. And, okay. So you've got the option to whitelist an alert. We're also going to go into the expert settings. And so as you can see here in the expert settings, there are a bunch of additional options. So we're going to go into those just a second. Do this. I'll tappa. And then you can see I can manually lock it out, or I can whitelist the signal. So now the background is going to be white. And so if you're driving along and it isn't being muted for any other reason, then you're going to find that this signal will not be locked out and it will alert full strength. And I know for the video I probably should have disabled all my other filtering. That would have been great, because then you get to hear that this signal actually would be alerting with normal volume, but sorry, you'll just have to pretend for now. So it should, but I've got other filtering stuff going on. Let's go into settings, lockouts, and back into the expert settings. So, okay, let's go through these one by one and see what they mean. So the first option, it's lockout when detected. The default is to say, after 3 passes of seeing this signal, I want you to automatically lock it out. You can make it lower, you can make it higher, depending on your preferences. The default is 3. And so you guys saw that when we were doing the pocket radar testing. It locked it out after 3 passes. If you want to, okay, so clear lockout if not detected. Let's say you've got a signal that's been locked out, either automatically or manually, okay, by default. If you pass a signal a bunch of times and it turns out the signal is actually not there, you drive in the same area and now that signal is gone, you can actually have the app unlearn that signal so that the lockout goes away. And then now if the lockout ever comes back down, along the road, it will alert and it will no longer lock it out. You can see you can adjust how many times you have to pass and not see the signal for it to go away. The default is 5. There's all these options here. There's an option there for liberal, which basically means permanent. If you lock out a signal, I want you to be just keep that signal there. It's been locked out before, and this is something I've been doing for testing. We'll set it for now for 5. And basically, if you do a lockout, keep that signal there. And that's pretty handy if you drive on an area where you're not actually that close to the signal, but sometimes you're right on the edge of detection range, and sometimes you'll pick it up and sometimes you don't. Or let's say, another good example is, let's say it's one of those automatic door openers, and you usually go there, during the daytime, but let's say at night some of the signals are actually turned off. Well, you can go there and you'll be in the same location and you will not see those signals, and if you do that enough, it can unlock. And so you can adjust this here and say how many times you need to pass by before the signal gets unlocked. So that should be pretty clear at this point. Okay, if you would like to assign extra passes needed to miss the signal, if you manually lock it out, you can do that. And this is really good. I really like this feature. So I have this one false, which I see really rarely. It, I think, comes from a school that's nearby, and it's only there on like certain times of the day, on weekdays. And so if I'm driving on the weekends or whatever, I'm not going to see this false. It's really sporadic, it's very weak, and I only pick it up on one stretch of road. So because it's missing so often, I like to just manually lock it out, and I know that I'm going to pass by the signal a lot of times and not see it, and I want that lockout to stay. So what I've done here, as I said, if I go in and manually lock a signal out, I want that lockout to stay and don't unlock the signal just because we've missed it a couple times. So that's an option there. The next thing is a similar idea with the whitelist. So if you pass by a signal that you've whitelisted a whole bunch of times and the signal is not there a whole bunch of times, it will delete the lockout, or well, the whiteout, if you will. Okay, clear whiteout radius. Okay, so the way a lockout works, fundamentally what a lockout is, it's going to say, in this location, I'm going to take a certain range of frequencies and a certain radius around this point. So as long as I'm in this point, if I see this signal, plus or minus a couple megahertz, in this size of a circle, I know that that's a false that I've seen before and I want it to be locked out. You can adjust the size of that radius to a couple different settings. I think in escort land it's like half a mile or something really large. We found that's kind of risky, and the reason could be if you've got a signal that's locked out way down the road, well, let's say you happen to run across a cop who's shooting a signal, who's shooting radar a little bit down the road, well, it could be locked out and you're not even close to that grocery store or whatever that false is. So what we've done is we've made options for much smaller lockout radiuses. Now, everything's a trade-off, right? So the way it works, if you think of driving down the road and let's say there's this long false that you're getting, instead of one really big radius or one really big lockout circle, you're going to have a bunch of smaller ones. And so they're going to line ... down the road. So it's not going to actually be creating one lockout, it's actually going to be creating several. So in testing right now we've got it set to 200 meters for the default radius. We've been playing around with it, and so far 200 meters seems to be a really good number for us. If you start playing around with this, let me know and see if you have really good results with maybe a different number. If you go smaller or larger, and let me know what's been working really well for you. As far as the frequency drift, I think on K-band we were running 6 megahertz for a while. I think right now it's like 9 or 10. You'll notice there's not an option to actually change it. We do have it hard-coded in the app right now. I forget off the top of my head exactly what it is, but it is a more narrow frequency range than what you'll see with some other products. So again, trade-offs. This means that it's a lot harder for a second signal to be in that exact frequency range. It has to be almost exactly the same. If it's close, depending on how close, it'll actually potentially cause a different alert. Now, the downside of having a really small frequency drift, there are a couple, and it's good to be aware of them because this will impact the way auto lockouts work. So if you've got a really small frequency range that's locked out, if a false alert drifts outside of that frequency range, it can then now look like a brand new alert and it will no longer be locked out. So a signal that was previously locked out will now suddenly no longer be locked out. In that situation, what you're going to find is the old lockout will eventually go away and a new lockout will be created. And in the time being, you're actually going to have two lockouts, at the old frequency and the new frequency. And so it will sometimes take a little bit more time to now learn this new signal. This is one of the things that's been done. It's going to create a little bit more false alerting, but it's there specifically to help prevent the situation of an actual threat being muted. So it's designed to be safer at the expense of being a little bit noisier. What could also cause frequency drift like that? Things like, low quality radar guns. Automatic door openers, they don't have to be super precise and specific. They're not calibrated to police standards. They're just, is a person standing in front of me? Yes, open the door. That's all I care about. It doesn't have to be exactly precise to get exact speed measurements. It's really simple. So those frequencies can drift. Same thing with temperature variations. So if you do a lockout in the summer, as you progress to cooler weather in the fall and the winter, that weather change can actually cause frequency fluctuations in the false alerts. And so as temperature changes during the seasons, you may find that some lockouts will then need to be recreated as frequency drifts happen. So it's good to be aware of that, because you will find sometimes, certain lockouts that you've done before may seem like they're not being locked out anymore. Is something broken? Not necessarily. It's just the way that the app is designed, and after a couple passes, it will now learn these new lockouts and re-lock out the signal. So good to know there. Anyways, let's get back to a couple more things. This is really cool. Use signal strength. So one feature that is unique to the V1, this detector actually has two antennas. It has the rear antenna and it has the front antenna right here. So one thing that's been done with the V1 and with lockouts now is we're doing everything in our power to make sure that a real alert is not muted. It's not foolproof. There's really no solution that's totally foolproof, and so we're just doing everything we can to make it as likely as possible that only false alerts are going to be muted and real alerts are going to be alerted to. So one thing that's been done, let's say you are encountering a radar source and it's coming in from this direction, right? From the front. Well, that signal, it's going to look very different to the front and to the rear antennas. It's going to be a lot stronger to the front antenna and weaker on the rear antenna. So let's say you're driving down the road and the alert is ahead of you. Well, because the signal is going to be stronger on the front antenna, the V1 will actually remember that. And so let's say you're driving down and you pass by the same false. It now has created a lockout using two antennas. And now, whenever you pass by that same signal, it says, not only is it the same frequency in the same location, but I also know that the signal is supposed to be a lot stronger in the front, and it is. And so it's saying, yep, this really looks like it's the same signal. Now, let's say you're in a situation where let's make this really hard, okay? Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's say, even though you're using really small radius lockouts, let's say you're right on the edge of that lockout circle, but you're not picking up the actual false alert. And you just happen to be in a situation where, boom, police radar is now being triggered, okay? Well, because you're still in that lockout radius, if the frequency is close enough to the false alert, well, it sees, I only actually see one signal in this radius, so I'm going to mute it. I'm going to lock it out. Well, what this is going to do is, let's say the false alert is supposed to be in front of you, right? But this signal that's actually coming from behind, this is going to say, this actually looks kind of different. This is not the same signal. I'm going to alert to this anyway. And this is what the signal strength is for. It basically says, okay, we're going to look at these two antennas and compare the signals and see, I know a lockout should be in front of me, but if the signal's coming from behind, this is a different signal. I want to alert differently. And so this is actually going to help, again, reduce the chances that a real alert will be muted. There is a little bit of customizability. You can adjust how strict the differences have to be, which basically says normal is a good place to start. If you want to be extra safe, you can say, you can kind of reduce the limits and the flexibility. So you say this one is really strong and this one is maybe only moderately strong. Depending on how tight your thresholds are, that may or may not be a good enough match to lock the signal out. So if you want to be extra safe, you can enable strong. The downside of that is let's say you're driving around and there's a car behind you as you're driving down the street. Well, that rear signal will actually be reflected into the car and back into the rear horn, which then could boost the apparent strength of the rear horn. And when you do that, the difference between the front and rear is going to vary compared to what it's used to. So that could actually, if you've got it set to strong, cause a situation where something that was locked out is now not going to be locked out. And so that's the trade-off of going to strong. If you go to normal, it's going to relax the threshold needed of the difference between the two to make it more likely that an alert will be locked out. Hopefully that makes sense. So the default is just normal settings. And then going back to learning mode, okay. Remember when we saw a signal for the second time and it had that light blue background? You can adjust that and say, if you're in learning mode, how many times do you need to actually see the signal before the signal gets locked out? So let's say you've got it set to, 7 passes needed to lock out the signal. You can show a different colored background after 2 passes or 3 passes or 4 passes, right? Because I have it set to lock out after 3 passes, I like it being set to 2 because now the second time that I pass by that same alert, I know that it's actually in the process of learning that signal. So I've got it set to 2. So if we go back into our lockouts here, oh, cool. Okay, so this one is now set to white. It's white out as we saw before. So we can remove that and go back here. Oh, one other thing that you guys are seeing, if we click on a signal, you see this stuff here for false alert, false true, moving and static. One thing that's currently under development now for V1, and this is not really related to lockouts, kind of, but just to let you know what this is, there's actually some artificial intelligence that's being developed currently for YaV1. And whenever you pass a signal, you can tap on it and mark, is it a true alert or is it a false alert? Is it a moving alert or is it a stationary/static alert? Is it instant on? You can mark all of that, and Frankie, the developer of YaV1, is actually going to take in all of this information sent in from users all over the world, so thousands and thousands of samples, and actually help figure out the differences between maybe a moving false alert, such as a car with blind spot sensors. And so in addition to using GPS to do lockouts, the artificial intelligence, we're hoping, it's working pretty well so far. I think it's like a 70% success rate with a pretty small sample size. So as we get more samples, it's going to only make things better. But we're getting it pretty good to where the V1 through the app is going to be able to identify the difference between a moving false alert, such as a car emitting K-band from its blind spot sensors, versus a stationary alert, like a grocery store or something. So if you're in a place for the first time, it can tell the difference between a stationary false alert and a moving false alert. So that's the goal, and I've got it set up. You can see it's learning now. Second pass. Oh, go to tap, come back. And so I could mark it as a false static alert, and that information would be sent out. I could upload my logs to Frankie, and he could put all that together. So that's a quick aside on what that is. But anyways, that's a quick look at auto lockouts for the YaV1. In a nutshell, just to summarize, it is pretty sophisticated, as you can see. There are quite a few parameters that the app is using to help differentiate between a true alert and a false alert. It's obviously the main things are the frequency and the location. That's basically the idea of auto lockouts. With this one, there's also a bunch of other stuff that's being taken into account, like the dual horn stuff and a whole bunch of fun things. So this is now the most sophisticated version of automatic GPS-based lockouts that we've seen. The goal of it, the overall intention, is to make it as safe as possible. We really want to help prevent, as much as possible, realistically, any chances of a real alert being locked out. And so that's why there's so much stuff here going on. We could do it a lot simpler, and it would be a lot easier, and honestly it would be a lot quieter because it wouldn't maybe mistake a false alert as now a new alert. So it's good to know if you're going to be running YaV1, it will be a little bit noisier. There will be some situations where something that you've locked out before will be unlocked. It may need to create a second lockout for one signal. And when it does that, it's going to be, unlearning the original signal. So good to know. If you're using it, just really, if you don't care about all this, but you made it through this whole video, awesome. You know, you can just enable auto lockouts, let it do its thing, and it'll learn the falses in the area, mute them, and you're good to go. Oh, one other thing that I'd like to show you guys. There's a couple different alert screens here. There's V1, Alert, and Tools, where you can change a bunch of different settings. There's another option here called Filter Mode, which it's actually not that popular of an option, but it is available. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Where is it? Lockout. Maybe under Display. Stable display filters. Okay, so we can filter out locked out signals. Now what this is going to do is, so this is locked out. So you can see right now we've had 3 passes, right? And then this K-band false is going to be totally locked out. If you want, you can go over to the filter screen, and even though the signal is showing up here in the V1, it will not show up here on the filter screen. So if you like the idea of having a signal be totally locked out and it just not bugging you anymore, let's say you're doing a thing where you've got the V1 here and you're running it in dark mode. If I transmit this pocket radar, well, it's totally muted. I'm going to do this. I'm going to raise the mute volume, okay, which is this knob here. So the V1 is seeing the signal, but I'm going to mute it so that you can't hear it. So it's dark here on the V1 and it's dark here in filter mode. So I'll turn the screen back on so that you can see. So in filter mode, it's not actually going to show you the locked out alerts. In the alert screen, it will. So if you want it to be totally silent and not bug you if it's a known alert, you can actually do that just by going into the filter screen. I personally prefer having the alert window on because I like seeing that, okay, I passed by this area, excuse me. I passed by this area a bunch of times and I know that there should be a lockout here, and so I can see that, cool, YaV1 is working, everything is working well, and I can do everything visually. So the volume is down and I can just look and see, yep, lockouts, everything is good, there's only one signal here. If I see a second signal, ooh, something is different. But in this case, I prefer having the alert screen. So it's up to you as far as what you choose. From what we've heard, most people do prefer the alert screen, and so if you want to enable it, go right ahead. It is in Settings, Display, and then down here at the bottom, Display Filters, and then Filter Lockout. So I'm going to turn it off because I don't use it. Cool. Oh, and I've lost GPS. You can see the red there, so it's not doing the low speed muting. So. Throat's getting dry from all this talking, so cool, there you go. Thanks for watching. There is, you can see now it's muted. That is a look at GPS, at auto lockouts, GPS-based auto lockouts in YaV1 2.0. Hopefully I've covered everything and it was pretty simple to understand. If you guys have any questions, let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, comments, if it's on the forum, post below. So, cool. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.